a ruined cloud giant palace, prisoners taken by a bad guy, a red dragon hell-bent on freedom, prisoners captured under a anti-magic cone, and a change of players. Let me tell you about the session that we had this evening on our brand new video series, After the Game. Before we start today's video, make sure you go down and hit that subscribe button. Give us a thumbs up if you enjoy our content. If you don't mind receiving the notifications, be sure to hit that bell so you know when we're posting new content. Share this link with friends who may enjoy the content as well. And be sure to leave a comment down below so we can help better organize content that you'll enjoy. And feel free to support us in the links in the description below. So this is a brand new video series we're starting talking about After the Game. Now we'll cover a couple of different games because I run multiple games as well as play in multiple games. The goal is to give you an interactive experience immediately following either a campaign or a session. In this video, we're going to talk about the session in a campaign I'm running for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition called The Last Light. Now this is a campaign that I've created, and ultimately when I created the campaign, the goal was to have 5th to 10th level character progression through Milestone. Because we started the sessions early, because the players had the ability and I had the time, I went ahead and started the campaign at 1st level and just allowed experience to build the characters up through to 5th level when the campaign was initially supposed to start. The premise is pretty basic. There is a big bad evil bad guy who is trying to allow his minions to control dragons and ultimately bring about the destruction of the area so he can have ultimate conquest via an undead dragon companion. Early in the game, I utilized the interactions of the player characters with the surrounding regional area to get a gauge on how they would be perceived by the local populace, as well as the temples and the crown, and just to get a good gauge on where they would or would not have support. Now, fast forwarding through that, tonight's session found us continuing from an earlier bit where the players had gotten up to a destroyed cloud giant palace. This is an old palace that is floating up on a big chunk of rock in the sky. One of the lieutenants, if you will, has been utilizing this as a base of operations to do some dastardly deeds from the home location that he apparently had been trying to gain ruleship over, or at least some power over. And there have been hints and breadcrumbs laid throughout the times that the PCs spent in the area of this bad guy kind of pulling strings behind the scenes. After destroying that bad guy, which was a surprise, they weren't supposed to when they did, but the players defeated that bad guy. However, by defeating him, it released the red dragon that he was controlling, who flew up back to his home, which the bad guy had been utilizing as a kind of base of operations. The players were able to get a ride up to that location and do a bit of exploring. They encountered harpies, they encountered elemental augmented undead giants, and came up with some great ways to overcome some of these foes. As we ended the last session, they had trapped a bridge and had 2 of the fire giant undead fall to their doom, as 2 frost giant undead elementally augmented foes were approaching. They reset the trap, and that's where we left off. Tonight's session, we started out already with a bit of a challenge. If you DM or GM, you know how, regardless of the prep and planning you can do, things can come at you all different ways, shape, and form. Unfortunately, we had 2 players who, due to their commitments in their personal lives and business lives, were not able to join, and rather than continue to put us on any type of hiatus or anything, they bowed out of the game. So we started out the game already with 2 players down. As the GM, and because these characters have already been in this section of the story, I can't just have them disappear. I like to give good agency and allow them some type of an out so that if the player is able to come back, they're able to resume play and continue their character's story. So for tonight's session, my plan was just to roleplay those characters and utilize them in-game, and I've got some creative ways for them to depart the group once this encounter is realized and seen through. Additionally, a third member of our group was unable to attend, and so I actually had to utilize 3 characters in-game while DMing. Generally, that's a little more than I like to do, but again, the other players have been anxious to continue seeing this story through, so I just bit my lip, pulled up the characters, and went ahead and played the 3 characters as well. Now the remaining party members had a trap set. They had a couple of undead giants who had some elemental powers coming at them. The giants failed their saves and also succumbed to falling to their doom. And then the players began to explore a little bit more. They couldn't see any other villains on. They did have in previous sessions some hints that there may be some bad guys such as a hag, and they knew that there were additional giants somewhere in this destroyed and broken up complex of the Cloud Giant Palace. So they kind of gingerly explored, crossing rough rope and lumber bridges to get to the palace proper. They did some exploring. They found the location where the stone giant undead were, as well as a couple of doors that they saw in one area, some bunks, and then the other area were all closed and stained glass windows. They weren't able to see aside from 2 shadows moving around. Utilizing a back area that had the walls destroyed and open, they came across the menagerie of the villain who used to inhabit this area that the party had already destroyed. They did a little bit of investigating. They were a little loud, however, getting up to this area, and the remaining guards of the area had some combat with them, but they handily dispatched them, captured one so that they could get some questions answered, and then proceeded to move into the menagerie of the captured prisoners of the bad guy that they had already dispatched, freeing them and getting a little bit more information. They found that there was a arcane set casting a cone of anti-magic down into the room so that these prisoners could not utilize magic or find ways to escape via magical divine interactions or spells. Here is where the player took a little bit of a detour. I expected them to continue going on, but they wanted to get this large stone that had the arcane runes on it, and so they spent quite a bit of time actually rigging up some scaffolding so they could get up to this large massive stone that has the arcane spell cast on it, and actually pulled the stone down. As they were in the process of that, again making quite a bit of noise as they're chiseling these iron bands holding this large 10-foot stone in place, the door opened where the stone giant undead were guarding. The stone giants walked away. While they were in the process of this, a voice called out to them a couple of times to come and parley, come and talk, almost tauntingly to them. They continued releasing this stone and then began wheeling it towards the throne room. Once they had secured this large stone, they began rolling it out and taking it to the throne room, where they found 2 of the undead stone giants in a far corner, and the dragon, the red dragon. It was a young red dragon on top of a large cloud giant throne that had piles of golden nuggets or golden ingots set atop of it. Now that's where we left the session on this one, ultimately because I wanted to build up a little bit of angst almost in the players and have them get excited and start thinking about what they want to do when we back up in a week and they interact with this young red dragon. As a DM, of course, some of the challenges were hard to overcome. Whenever you're missing players, of course, you have to decide how you're going to continue on. Do you do a separate story? Do you do a one-shot? Do you do side quests? What do you do? Because we've been in this environment and this setting for a couple of sessions, I wanted to just continue on and push through. So that's why I elected to just play these heroes and get good ending points for them to carry on with their own stories for the players' benefits. But additionally, some of the things that I didn't expect them to do from the previous sessions was utilize traps to take on these undead. I anticipated this to be a little bit more combat heavy and really had to adjust the villains that I was going to pit them up because I had so many players of 5th level. Their use of trapping the bridges I thought was extremely clever and really played into their characters as well. So I didn't want to modify anything. I wanted to continue this progression in this story that I had planned and set as I had initially written it. I didn't add additional villains. I didn't add additional obstacles. I wanted to just continue carrying on because they've already got difficult encounters ahead of them. Now, ultimately, the paladin of the group is looking for a weapon that he can utilize in his adventures. He knows it's here. He, in this session, found the other paladin who had it and freed him from his bonds, which gives the story for that search of weapon good closure once they complete the setting environment in dealing with this young red dragon. Additionally, I didn't expect the party to really think of capturing and utilizing the arcane focus of the anti-magic comb. Of course, as a DM, whenever you're utilizing a plot device like that, you have to think about what if your players want to utilize that. Of course, if they want to continue utilizing it, they've got some challenges ahead. It is a large arcane focus on a 10-foot diameter stone slab, so moving it around is extremely difficult. Getting it from the Cloud Giant Palace down to the ground is going to be challenging, but it is there and they do have it in their possession. So ultimately, depending on how the environments come out and what happens with this adventure, it's something that they could utilize in lots of different ways going forward. It'll be interesting to see what they think of for how to utilize this going forward. Definitely something I put in my notes is this is something that a couple of the players were really focused on having and acquiring and utilizing in some way, shape, and form. Now I have some good ideas on how can I utilize that to create further stories in the adventure that I've already written. Now, this story ultimately focuses on a number of dragons, so going from wormlings up to adults, and then one large undead Dracolich. Prior to the start of the actual campaign at 5th level, they've already dispatched the green wormling, so it's already taken one of the dragons out of the picture. Now they're in the environment of the red, so they've still got a blue, a white, and a black to contend with. I will have to adjust a little bit because each of the encounters was intended to provide enough difficulty and challenge to advance them in a milestone up a level. So looking at the dragons themselves and the environments that they're in, I'm going to have to think a little bit on my feet and come up with a way to give them an additional milestone prior to them meeting or encountering that Dracolich. However, I think everybody really enjoyed the session. Generally, when I hear feedback, it really helps me to develop further on. However, getting feedback from players can be a little bit of a challenge. My rule of thumb is no news is good news. If your players are not having fun, they'll let you know. If they don't like something, they'll let you know. Generally, if a player does not enjoy something, they're going to let you know right away, especially when you ask for feedback. Oftentimes, if your players aren't saying anything or aren't showering anything with you, don't panic. It means you're doing good. You're meeting expectations. Your players are getting their expectations of the game met. When you start getting lots of feedback in the positive. That means you've done something extremely well. So find when you get those opportunities to get that type of feedback, what was it and how can you continue to do it more and more. Just remember, if you set your expectations too high, hitting those goals could be more challenging. Some of the real stars of tonight's sessions was our goblin, who really thought to utilize this large stone and find ways to utilize it. Our cleric, who actually decided to attune to a magic weapon that he had acquired. Our paladin, who finally has that bit of information. He's met the paladin that he needed to find and save, and he knows he's on the right path to getting his Mace of Disruption. Very huge opportunity for him. And our sorcerer, who is able to utilize his chromatic orb. He used it right on the verge of that anti-magic cone. Had he waited until his target backed up or moved additionally ahead, he would not have been able to utilize his magic because of that anti-magic cone. So that was kind of luck and good timing on his part on when he utilized that spell. Now, some of the NPCs that they encountered, of course, Castor, who is the paladin that our paladin Jaw had to save, as well as a Chiron, who is offered to take them to a different location once they complete this kind of quest. That Chiron is going to play a bigger part in the story, as is Castor, the NPC, as they continue to build these bonds and utilize some of the things that they'll find. Depending on how they deal with this red dragon is going to be really interesting, because some of it could play into big aspects in their future interactions with the other dragons that have been released, as well as anything that could happen potentially when they encounter that Draco Lich at level 10. I think this session went really well despite all the challenges that we faced as a group. This campaign we play weekly on Thursday nights. So as we do after the game, following our Thursday night D&D session, it'll be interesting to see some of those changes. However, after the game, I also want to talk about some of the recent campaigns that I've recently ended, as well as some of the other games that I'm currently running, including a Star Trek game, a Gangbusters game, and a high-level 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons game. I hope this quick view after the session has been helpful for you. My notes I've been taking throughout the session, I'm going to reorganize them, get them on a solid piece of paper, put it in my binder, and then continue to prep up for next week. Can't wait to let you know how that one goes. I hope you enjoyed that video. Here's a link to another video that you may enjoy. Also, make sure you hit that subscribe button to help us grow. If you'd like to support us, make sure you check out the description of the video with some links and leave a comment to let us know, where will your adventures take you?